This morning on Media and Society, we discuss the role of the media in helping you gain financial literacy. Well, hello and welcome to Media and Society. I'm your host, Naledi Moleo. Of course, this is the show where we take a look at the intersection between the media and society. And as usual, the show really would not be complete without your input. So over the next hour, feel free to give us a call. The number is 011-714-0661.
Rates continuing to rise. Parents are finding it tough to keep up with the rising cost of living. The Stokvel Amadodagathixo started with just 13 men from this community 4 years ago and has expanded to just over 20. Their main aim was to save for school uniforms and school supplies. Members also ensure that participants have funds to spend on Christmas and for school needs in the new year.
At the same time, we mustn't forget that on January, our children have to go back to school. So we have to support them by buying them some textbook and uniforms. So we still need money on January to support our children. So that is the reason why we separated our Stokvel in 2 times.
But besides saving, the group also help each other manage their finances.
We have had programs, and also we're still going to have other programs to say, once we have saved this money, how do you utilize it for the benefit of your family and improve your family and livelihood? And also to say, how do we improve our credit score? Because we have found out that many of our brothers and sisters, they are swimming in debts, but they are not improving in clearing their names.
The men say their long-term plan is to grow into an investment stokvel. I'm Nuntlagani Pomakwaza for SABC News in Durban.
Yeah, so great examples there of how South Africans are, of course, really wanting to give themselves some financial freedom and creating it in very creative ways. But let's get into our discussion for this morning. The media might be tempting your desires a lot, of course, so to really not, suffer from FOMO with ads on everything that you feel you deserve. Social media suggesting that you might miss out if you don't join the trendiest events and splurge on the latest items. However, it's really important to keep in mind that upcoming financial challenges in January, like school fees and registrations, are still coming at us. Planning your finances wisely throughout the year enables you to enjoy a joyful holiday without sacrificing your financial responsibility. And of course, it's important that as we go further and further into the silly season, we make careful choices, we allocate funds for future needs and make prudent decisions to ensure a smooth transition into the new year. But we're going to talk a little bit about how the media can help you do so. Are we giving you enough information to make the right decisions financially? Joining us for that discussion is Mr. Thabo Hollo, who is the Program Manager for Financial Education at Old Mutual. Thabo, good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning, and thank you for bringing me in.
We really do appreciate it. Hayley Parry, who is the money coach and facilitator at One Life's The Truth About Money, also joins us. Hayley, good morning to you. I think your mic is off, Hayley. Just check that if your mic is on. And then we've got Ndumiso.
Apologies. Morning, Naledi.
No problem. We've got you now. Ndumiso is also on the line with us. He's an economist, of course. Ndumiso, welcome back. Always good to have you on SABC News.
Good morning, Naledi, and thanks so much for having us this morning.
Yeah, and then of course, just to bring in the element around the role of the media, we're joined in studio by Mr. Tshepo Mawai, who is the editor at the SABC's economic desk. How are you? Good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us.
So it's a pleasure speaking to you.
Tshepo, I want to start with you. I mean, let's talk a little bit about just going into the silly season. Just how much financial education are we actually giving our viewers? Are we doing it sufficiently?
Well, the tools are available, but many people still do not have access to those tools. And partly it's because people tend to turn a blind eye on issues of personal finance. One, because it's quite embarrassing to talk about issues of when you're highly indebted, and it's something that even when people are around the table, they would not even touch that. But also, I think it's always better to start early on issues of investment and taking the right decision, because people often realize it much later in life that they've made fatal flaws in terms of how they manage their finances, and they tend to just bury their head in the sand and continue to take and accumulate more debt just to get by. And one important issue is that if you look at our financial sector, the number of people who are permanently employed is quite small. And you have this slew of financial products targeting the very segment that in fact is shrinking. So they need to meet those targets. Banks need to, financial service providers need to meet those targets. It's December. They need to push some of those credit. And it's people who already are highly geared. They're highly leveraged, they've got debts, and now they're taking one unsecured loan in order to spend during Christmas time. And the reality is many people will never get out of that debt trap until they retire. Perhaps when they retire, they will use part of their retirement saving, which is never a good idea. It was not intended to. That's their savings grace. And then they will pay off their debt, and that's when they will gain their financial freedom. And beside that, there isn't much that it's available to help those people, because they are already. But I mean, the people are starting to learn here and there. You look at new vehicle sales numbers that have been quite stagnant. Whether is it a question of banks just tightening up the lending criteria, we're seeing people are keeping their cars much longer. Right. And I would think that partly is because new vehicle prices are very high, and people realize that, I mean, I cannot afford to pay 15,000 rand on a vehicle. I could be using that money elsewhere, and that's why you're seeing used car markets. It's actually in demand. People are buying used cars because of that affordability. But there are people who make mistakes, especially this time of the year, because they are under pressure. They really want to make a statement. There's a say that you just want to thank your body, you thank yourself because it's been a tough year, and that's when people make mistakes and they get into this debt trap and they just can't get out.
And I think there's something to be said about the role of the media and the sort of pressure that we put on consumers as well, and perhaps we'll get into that, right? Because at the same time, it is the adverts that help us keep going as a broadcaster, but a lot of those adverts then pulling some of our viewers in and luring them in with all this temptation to spend. But I'm going to bring in our virtual guests now. Thabo, I'm going to start with you, right? Just as someone who essentially focuses on financial education, do you think that the content is out there on mainstream media? I talk about the adverts, right, and how we're luring the consumer in to spend, but surely there's a responsibility as well from the media to do the reversal of that, right, and educate them. Are we seeing enough of that?
Thanks, Naledi. I'm not sure if we can ever say there's enough financial education. And I'm not also sure if it's entirely the role of media. Media has a role to entertain and educate, right? So financial education is not necessarily the only central thing that media should be doing. Of course, there's a lot that still can be done. There's still quite a bit in terms of content dissemination that can be done. Product placement, for instance, that encourage prudent spending, product placement that encourages savings, etc., etc. So there's a bit that media can do, but I'm not convinced that it's entirely the media's role to do that all by itself. Of course, there's a sense of responsibility, perhaps on behalf of the media, to behave in a particular way. And also on behalf of on the side of the consumers, to be discerning in terms of the choice making and listening to the messaging, managing things like FOMO, managing things like Tsepo said, how do you do that? So there's a way that consumers also need to be discerning and not just leave the whole thing entirely to media. There's also a role of financial services providers themselves in terms of pushing financial education and educating their clients. And Tsepo, yes, whilst we know that there's issues of targets, but the best customer for financial services is the one that is prudently geared, not overburdened with debt. So yes, there's a role of media, but there's also a role of society. There's a role of financial services providers themselves.
Yeah, okay. Haley, would you agree with Thabo?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there is a broader role here where, we also need to get schools involved. We started this interview with a great segment around what the community is doing themselves, and I think if you can then find an intersection between, people who are desperate for this knowledge, because let's be honest, getting yourself a financial education is a critical life skill, but unfortunately it's one that most of us never receive at school or at home, and so when you've got this opportunity where people are actively working towards figuring out how to manage their money better, that's where you've got incredible opportunities. Like Thabo said, where your financial services companies, media, and everyone can just make this kind of content more readily available, because once you put that in front of people who are trying to do the right thing, and I think it's important to note that often that time is when we're facing a cash crunch. When times are good, when times are easy, you have less need to figure out how to manage the money you do have better. And I think that's why right now is an incredibly opportune time, because everyone is feeling the pinch. Never mind the silly season. It's been a tough year, and I think it might get tougher in 2024 too. So we've got an incredible opportunity now, and on platforms like this to say, right, these are the resources, this is your opportunity, go and gift yourself a financial education this silly season so that you can make 2024 a year where you can sleep again at night, where you're improving your credit score, where you're reducing debt. That is, I think, the opportunity we have at the moment.
Yeah, lots of work. It's not very encouraging though when you say, we might have an even tougher 2024, and that's the reality that we sort of have to prepare ourselves for. And Dumiso, I know that you do a lot of these sort of media interviews, and a lot of the time we have these bigger sort of economic discussions, right, where we talk, GDP, interest rates, all of that. How many times do you, in interviews, are you asked, to make that information more and more accessible so that South Africans really don't feel that we're talking over their heads, that we're speaking directly to them about how tough 2024 actually is going to be? I mean, is that something that you asked, or is everything still very high level in the discussions that you have with the media?
Yeah, thanks, Naledi. I think in my experience thus far, a lot of the discussions around financial literacy and so forth has really been at a macro level and really understanding the broader environment and what are some of the factors and shifts that are taking place in the macro, both domestically but also globally. But I think it's very rare that we're able to get into the opportunity of looking deep in terms of the implications for individual consumers and various consumer profiles, and of course how these various effects or macroeconomic effects directly impact individual consumers. But I think one of the key things that has become quite important as a result of that, I think, opportunity or gap that exists is really in the fact that I think consumers as well, we need to view ourselves as firms or businesses, because in the last quarter, as having rounded up a lot of strategic sessions and corporate plans for the next 3 to 5 years, I think the same outlook would need to then be adopted by ourselves as consumers so that we can begin to really make sense of these macroeconomic shifts and how ultimately they affect our budgeting and, of course, our forecast and planning and goals for the future.
Yeah. When was the last time you Tsepo, went and created content like, how to actually structure your monthly budget? Because a lot of the time, again, we have the high level discussions. Are we making the information accessible?
Well, I think there's space to do more in that area where you're targeting, people and giving them the basic information, because I think it's at a basic level that you can actually make a difference. Where people, if you ask many people, how much do you spend on petrol a month? Many people do not know how much, but they go to work every single day. And if you cannot quantify such something as basic, which you can do at home, it's going to be very difficult to know and differentiate various financial products from another. Because that becomes, it's just too complicated. Many people cannot do it. And I know a lot of work has been done, but it's still a very complex terrain to go into. But I think, the media has a huge role. But the level of engagement also, I think, needs to be on another level. Because most of the time we do stories that relate to financial literacy. But the feedback, isn't not there. There isn't not much in terms of what you're getting. Even the engagement, when you go out there and engage consumers. The moment you start talking about their personal finance, how you're coping in this high interest rates, people often say it's tough. But they don't want to go deep and say, but what are the issues that perhaps we can talk about? I mean, often we when we cover our stories, we look for case studies, people who can relate their actual experience. Extremely difficult. People will talk to you behind the scenes, but when you say, can you talk about it, people can learn something from your experience, but they don't want to talk about it. They're like, no, just write about it, don't put my name there, because it's embarrassing, because people often want to portray certain character about them, and it's not something that they're quite comfortable. But I also think perhaps employers as well have a huge role to play when a person gets signed their contract on day one. I personally think needs to be given some kind of background, lessons about how to run their finances. Because there's so much consumerism in South Africa that when you get a job, the first thing you want to get a German car, top of the range with high performance, and after 3-4 years, you are in that debt spiral. You can't get out, because a nice GTI, you need to get a nice townhouse. A nice townhouse needs nice furniture. Nice furniture needs a nice girlfriend. And nice girlfriend is high maintenance. So I mean,
it's a lot.
Sure, absolutely.
It's a lot of pressure.
Sure.
And the thing is that this is the reality that many South Africans live, right? And we're told over and over again that we are a highly indebted nation. So Haley, I'm going to bring you back in here and say, okay, well, talk to me about what Thapo says. The appetite for financial education simply isn't there from the consumer's end. Is that what you find as well?
Yes and no. So what we find is that for a lot of people, they understand the importance of getting a financial education, but what they tend to do is go, it's just like life's a little bit hectic at the moment and I'm going to get to it. I'm just not going to do it right now. But what we find is that if you have a targeted intervention, suddenly we can get people's attention and they realize how important it is to actually get on top of this now. And so for us, what we find works really well in the workplace, for example, is a 45 to 60 minute webinar where you're just touching on a couple of topics. There's edutainment, right? We're keeping them engaged, but we're also educating them. And then for the people who want to know more, what we've done is we've opened the door and we've shown them what the next steps are. And that tends to work really well. And what we find is that, you've then presented people with the option of taking charge of their own financial future, and you've given them an easy way to do it. I think what stops a lot of people from taking this first step is often fear and shame. And if we can remove those from the equation, most people are desperate for this knowledge. And once they start on that journey, they start building confidence, and they start learning how to manage their money better. So that initial reluctance, I think, is because often in the financial space, there's shame around things like debt, for example, around having, did I make the wrong decision? I should have done this. And that fear and shame can often paralyze you. And so when we say, hey, it's normal to make mistakes when you even know what you're doing, remember that you have not ever been taught any of these skills. So making mistakes is completely normal. When we start from that place and we say, you know what, it's normal to have made mistakes. Forgive yourself, and now let's figure out a better way forward. That's when people actually want to engage and want to take the next step, and then they're on this journey, which is a critically important one. But once you remove those little initial hurdles, we find people are actually really excited to get this knowledge and to start implementing it.
Yeah, so I want to thank you for that, Hayley. What we'll do is we're going to open up the lines as well and just hear from you, the viewer, right? Feel free to call us. The number is 011-714-0661. Where are you getting your financial education? Where would you like to see more of it? Give us a call, 011-714-0661. We take a short break. We'll continue with the conversation after this. Welcome back. You're still watching Media and Society with myself, Naledi Moleo. And of course, we continue our discussion around financial education. Where are you getting it? And would you like to see the media bring more of that to you? Give us a call if you'd like to share your thoughts with us. 011-714-0661 or 714-0662. Okay, we continue our discussion. And one of the things that we touched on before we got into the ad break there, Thabo, was the appetite, right? And perhaps as a financial education specialist yourself, have you seen an appetite for it?
No, absolutely is. And Hayley was absolutely spot on. Sometimes we don't know what we don't know, and we don't know that we need help up until we actually need help. And what we're finding now is employers that are taking responsibility in terms of that. For instance, EAP programs that are there, some HR programs that are there to say, look, even before people get into the space of debt or any of sorts of transactions, let's help them by setting them up correctly. So we do get, there is definitely an awareness in terms of the need for financial education. Whether we're doing enough, that's still, the jury is still out there.
Yeah.
But in terms of the willingness of media, of practitioners to hone in and practice financial education, is definitely there. And yes, we do see appetite from those that make decisions that are starting to pick up financial education as a critical part of their work programs, yes.
Yeah. Can we talk about access, though, Ndumiso? Because, again, we're going to talk about, we have these high-level discussions, and we're forecasting that 2024 is going to be a particularly difficult year. But we're having these conversations in English. That's the reality, right? So are these conversations, in your view, taking place on the platforms where our people really are?
Thank you, Naledi. I think that's a very important and valid point that you've raised, especially on the question of access. And I would even go further to say, perhaps when it comes to the availability of financial education broadly, we need to put it access and success patterns. So once we've ensured that there's widespread access to financial tools and information, what are the determinants that really indicate to us that there's success in consumers and people being able to use those tools in effective ways? And language is indeed an important one, not only just English, for example, but also the language of finance, because sometimes the language of finance can be quite intimidating for a non-financial person. And of course, that might then lead to that, reservations to want to engage with financial information. So at various levels, whether we're talking about debt or whether you're talking about investments or even inflation and the effects of inflation on the building, on the appreciation of your wealth or preservation of your wealth, and what is wealth, and all of those components, I think the question of language and the widespread levels of financial language as well becomes quite important, and its availability at the various levels, whether it be an individual who might have dropped out of high school, for example, which I think from a South African population point of view, there's a large population of that, or you may have graduated post-matric. What is the kind of financial information that is reaching you at the level of your comprehension, and to what extent are we able to translate that in meaningful success indicators so that you can be able to be effective in utilizing those financial tools, which I think is a big component in being able to succeed in this area.
Yeah, language, it's a big one here, because and you as the economics editor, I'm sure, deal with this this question on a daily basis, because you essentially need to be feeding content to all the radio stations as well. They're going to want that content, but do they have the language for it?
That's right. Our African language have not really kept pace with the developments, and I mean things are happening fast. I mean we still don't have an African language to describe a live cover, for example. A funeral cover, people can relate to it quickly because you know it's on your face, and that's why people are buying more live covers than funeral cover. Just an interesting anecdote. Yeah, the SABCs. You'd find that a producer needs about extra minutes to just to explain a phrase as simple as a live cover, 3 lines, so that because we don't have a word for it.
Yes.
And by the time they get to the middle of that description, the show has ended.
Time's up.
And people have not really grasped that because, and it's not just that phrase, but a whole lot of a slew of economics phrases. We are more descriptive than actually use one single phrase. Because we don't have the language has not kept pace with that, and it's just one of the challenges that we experience when we have to share this, and also of course you only have so much time to do that.
So is there a sense then that particularly on some of the media platforms that are speaking that aren't English focused platforms, right, that what we do is the money discussion almost as a filler, that it's actually not taken very seriously in Setswana, in Sesotho, on Lesedi, on Motsweding?
That's right, and listeners are left to the mercy, either mercy of the person who's and the understanding how that person interprets various offerings, products, or whatever it is that can help people, and things can be lost in that translation when people are explaining based on their own understanding. I mean, we invite guests to come in and talk about how people can use debt counseling and things like that. There are a lot of criminalities involved in some of the products that masquerade as, you know, going to help people who are highly indebted. Our languages are not there yet, but obviously we do our best in order to try to keep pace with the latest development. And at the same time, there are people who are taking advantage of the very same people who have difficulties getting their finances in order. Debt counseling has been one big challenge where you find that people are crying. They're like, I thought they're going to reduce my debt and all that, but this is not what I'm getting, because there are a lot of unscrupulous players in that area, and loan sharks, you know. People are in it because if you have a household debt to disposable income, that's at 62%. People are like, oh, I'm highly indebted and I need quick cash. What can I do? I don't care, as long as I can get it. And the demand for loan sharks is on another level. And these are people in their communities, their neighbors, who are offering this product, and they are trapped in it.
Sure.
Yeah.
It's heartbreaking, actually, because the cycle, once it's running, it really doesn't stop, right? So you almost need to get that assistance and that information. And can we talk a little bit about what we are doing right, though, Thabo? Because, you know, at the same time, we're saying we're not giving our people the financial education, or maybe we need more of it. There's something that we have done right. I mean, we played that package earlier of that community and their Stokvel and how they're planning and getting ready for 2024. I love those kind of stories of the way that we creatively capacitate ourselves, and somehow we've managed to even bring information to those groupings to say, well, we can do more with what we've created, right, Thabo?
Absolutely, and yes, let's not hasten to throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Right.
There's quite a bit that is being done. I'll give you an example. The organization that I work for, Old Mutual, has a program that does financial literacy in native languages, right? Right at the primary school level, right? And we work together with the Department of Basic Education to mainly mainstream financial literacy as concepts. Right from the bottom end, and we're working with high schools, we're working with varsities, and doing financial, because the realization is by the time somebody gets into a work situation, it might be a little bit late. So the whole idea is let's start it right at the bottom, right at the primary school level, at a high school level, and then go into tertiary institutions. Tsepo mentioned that we also have speaking opportunities on African language radio stations. Yes, we do. I wish it could be a little bit more, Tsepo, but unfortunately, it's not. But we do have, on a regular basis, people having slots to talk about financial education or financial related matters on radio station, and I'm talking now African language radio stations in particular.
Yeah.
But there's quite a bit that is being done, not only in media like broadcast media, but if you look at social media, for instance, there's YouTube channels that carries a whole lot of relevant financial education and financial literacy content out there. So there's quite a bit that is being done by financial services providers at an individual, all financial services providers at their individual level, but also at industry level. For instance, ASISA does a bit of work in terms of financial literacy programs. The Banking Association does a lot in terms of financial education programs. So there's quite a bit that is being done. The question might be, are we doing enough? And obviously, when we would say we're doing enough is when we start seeing those key indicators, the debt levels start to drop, the savings rates start to increase. Then that's when we get. For now, there's still quite a bit that still needs to be done, but there's definitely a lot that is being done. We have the Financial Services Sector Conduct Authority monitoring the activities of financial education. They actually have a council that specifically looked at financial education. So there's quite a bit that the financial sector is doing in that space. But again, are we doing enough? I wish we could do more than that, but we only have a limited resource base to do what we need to do.
Yeah, and I think it's important, though, to celebrate the green shoots, right? Because, I mean, we're innovative as a country. We really, really are. Taking your calls on 011-7140661. We're asking you, where are you getting your financial education, and how can the media bring more of that to you? We've got Sechele on the line in Kurumani. Sechele, good morning to you. Thanks for calling.
Good morning, ma'am. How are you?
I'm well, Ndate. Thank you for calling us. What are your thoughts?
Yes, let me greet the panel also.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a concern concerning the issue that you are talking about. At one stage, I had accounts here around my place that I used to pay monthly. And then someone called me and said he will help me to put all these accounts together and make it one payment. And I agreed with them because I thought they will be helping me out. At last, when they were supposed to distribute this money to the creditors, they could not pay those people. I end up in the credit bureau.
Goodness.
So how can you help me out on that one? Because the last money that they said they did not receive, I even get to the bank where I deposited money. It's an amount of 940.
Sure.
So they could not account for that money up to date.
Yeah, that's.
So I want to hear from the panel.
Yeah, but let me ask you this, Sechele. When you got that call to essentially consolidate your debt, had you heard of debt consolidation before? So I'm essentially asking you if you'd even understood what you were getting yourself into. Is that information readily available for you?
No, they called me and they say they want to help us out because they say there is a government issue that helps people out when they are in debt.
Yeah,
So
okay. So what we'll do, we'll take your number and then we'll pass it on to our experts. So thank you so much for calling in. We're taking more calls, 011-714-0661 or 0662. We're asking you, where are you getting your financial education, right? And how is it that the media really can help you stay afloat and ensure that, especially as we go into the festive season, you're not making all the worst decisions and you're somewhat prepared for January in 2024. Haley, I'm going to come back to you and let's talk more about these green shoots. You know, obviously Thabo talked about some of the programs that they have of, financial education at primary school level. Talk to me a little bit about some of the innovative things that you're seeing. I talk about stokvels and, lately you've even started to see property stokvels. My goodness, the people are getting really, really innovative out there. What do you find really encouraging though?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think Thabo touched on quite a lot of the things we're seeing, and what we're definitely seeing is an increase in it. Like I said earlier, I think this cash squeeze that we are finding ourselves in has prompted the various sectors of society to kind of increase what they're doing. One of the programs I really love is Truth About Money, which is bringing free online financial education courses to people. There's a long form one which gives you a comprehensive personal finance education. Then there's short ones. For example, there's a half-hour online course that you can do about getting out of debt. And if your previous caller, I think his name was Shitelo, if he had been able to just do a course like that for half an hour prior to engaging with the company that phoned him to consolidate his debt, he would have been able to make informed decisions. So these free resources exist. There's one around budgeting. There's one for targeting tweens and teens so that we start them early and give them this kind of financial education in a language that not only they can understand but they can relate to, because there's some parallels drawn between online gaming, which we know the tweens love, and managing your money. And so I think these initiatives are fantastic examples around how these small things that you start can start to have really big impact. Because one of the things that we do around these programs is we actually track behavioral change. So it's one thing putting these programs out there, giving people access, but the next step is, do we see them making an impact? And what we're seeing is that impact, that behavioral change is happening. And that for me is the most exciting part of all of these initiatives, because when we can start to prove that the initiatives we're putting in place are really making a difference, well, that's when we get really excited as financial educators.
So this is what we'll do, right? We're going to take a short break, and then what I'm going to do is when we come back, I'm going to ask you guys all for a few tools. And I know you've mentioned so many great ones right now, Hayley, but a few tips that we can really think about as we get into the festive season. And Ndumiso, of course, will help us. You'll throw the bones and forecast what 2024 is going to possibly be like, so that we're prepared as we spend over the festive season. We take a short break. We're back in a moment. Welcome back. You're still watching Media and Society, and this morning we're asking, where are you getting your financial education, and how can the media bring more and more of that to you? Where's the gaps that you see? Give us a call, 011-714-0661 or 0662. We've got a caller, Sali, in Soweto. Sali, good morning to you.
Good morning, ma'am. How are you?
I'm well, sir. Thank you for calling. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with what we have been discussed. I just logged in your program 10 minutes ago, but I picked up what they are saying about financial literacy. I've been running a company. I'm running a company for 20 years now. We went further than financial literacy, where we found that the technicality is not being explained as they put it there. What is his name? Thabo there and Tebo. The language barriers and the availability, especially availability of explaining the technicality of repairing these damages. We innovated what is called credit literacy and wellness program, where now 90% of population is blacklisted, and we picked up that people are not knowledgeable in how to repair and how to fix their financial spending. And I was simply saying to your platform there, to Tepo and Haley there, to say, can we take it further to fix up, not only give information about insurances, money, savings and all that, but currently now we are being challenged by unaffordability, unavailability of how to repair the damage, like credit bureau records, how to repair your financial spending, how to, it's a journey, this thing. This whole financial literacy is a journey. And people need to know the hidden details. Currently what we see, the hidden details are not explained. And I agree with Sepo to say people have been exploited out there. I agree with Thabo, people have been exploited because the technicality is known by the highlights, is known by the educated people, but an ordinary man on the street doesn't understand what is a credit score and how to increase your credit score.
Yeah.
I will quote Tepo by saying debt cancelling. It's a mess. It's a mess. We're trying to fix that as currently as a company, as we have experienced this for the past 22 years.
Yeah.
The debt cancelling industry is taking advantage of lack of knowledge at the same spot. The debt cancelling, debt review, that you were mentioning consolidation. People don't know the catch. What is the catch? They want quick fix.
Yeah.
Which is not possible in money. It's not quick fix.
And the thing is, we need to reach them before some of those unscrupulous individuals are able to get to them. Right. Thank you so much for calling, Solly. Very, really great insights, and continue the great work that you're doing then to inform those around you. I'm gonna bring you in here, Ndumiso, and ask you, like I said earlier, to throw the bones, if you will. Interest rates, what we're expecting for 2024, because those things are important. It means if you're in debt, you need to prepare yourself for what that debt is going to look like within the next year, right?
Indeed, Naledi, indeed. And interest rates are quite an important component in terms of the financial well-being of people. But what we've seen from a monetary policy perspective is that we're seeing elevated interest rates that are higher for longer, as it were. And in 2024, depending again on what was likely to happen, because part of the some of the elements that drive inflation in our environment are cost push-led, which are linked to some of the structural challenges such as ESCOM and the likes of transport and logistics and so forth, which is the cost of the affordability of the cost of goods and services, and affects the overall inflation number. But there are estimates around looking at a reduction in interest rates sometime in the second half of 2024. But again, in economics, you say ceteris paribus, all things remain constant.
Okay.
And so we will then have to see what those conditions and whether or not those structural factors will then be ameliorated. But that would be to say at the level of the consumer, it then means that we need to continue to be prudent in terms of how we manage our finances. And I think it's also important to really have we just had the medium-term budget policy statement. It's important to the consumer as well to have a 3-year horizon of what we look our finances to be like, whether it be at the level of the debt levels that we presently have, whether it be our income potential based on whether or not we may have getting promotions at work or getting additional certificate in increasing your education levels or know-how or competencies to improve your ability to earn income. I think that's also quite important, so that when we speak about these macroeconomic factors, you're able to then digest them at an individual level and see what that looks like in terms of your scenario for the next 3 years.
Yeah, great one. Thank you so much for that. So plan ahead. You can plan 3 years ahead. It really is a great one. Thabo, bring in some tips, right? Hey, here we go. We've just come out of this long weekend and we've bribed. We've already spent some of that money already. And then we're going to prepare for Christmas and New Year's Eve. Just give us something just to snap us out of it a little bit before we get into January.
Slow down. Slow down. Don't forget that there's still January, and for some reason January becomes 66 days.
Yeah.
So you're still going to have a very long January. So slow down. Spend within your means. Live within your means. Spend prudently. You're still going to have a spike around the 24th. You're going to have another spike around the 31st. Please slow down. But as far as the new year is concerned, we go into a phenomenon of New Year's resolutions, right? Part of the New Year's resolutions should also include part of your proper smart planning, right? That then drives your budgeting. Please stick to the rules of budgeting. Reduce your debt. In as much as the interest rate, Ndumiso, I'm not sure where we're going to play. You said ceteris paribus. If it happens that it goes down, please continue to reduce your debt. Try create those small nest egg. Create your emergency savings on the side. But for this remainder of the days, please slow down.
Okay, great one. I think in about 30 seconds, Hayley, a tip for us.
I think those have been fab tips. One of the other things I'd like to add is concentrate on paying yourself first. Right. So you go to work, you work exceptionally hard to earn that salary. And most people think that the amount they get paid is the problem. And it's not. It's not about how much you make, it's about how much you keep.
Right.
So you have to figure out how you can keep more of your salary. Think about yourself, as Ndumiso said, as like a business would. How do I make a profit myself? Well, in very simple budgeting terms, that means spend less than you earn.
Yeah.
So for the remaining time we have until your next payday, figure out how much money you have left in your bank account and divide that into the number of weeks left until your next payday.
Right.
And if you know I've only got X that I can spend every week, it gives you the opportunity to course correct within those weekly limits, right? Instead of getting to the 27th of December and realizing, like Top said, that you've got 61 days left in January and 0 ZARs to get you there. So that weekly spending is a great way to kind of just make sure you can get yourself through to the next payday. And then in 2024, please focus on paying yourself first. You're the person who's working so hard for that salary. Don't give it away to everyone else.
Wonderful tips. I wish we had more time, but I think we've done some really good work, and hopefully we've enlightened you a little bit as well as you get into the festive season. Tsepo, continue the great work that you do. You've got the massive responsibility, of course, of bringing this economic and financial information to our people. So keep it up, and all the best to you. And that's how we wrap up Media and Society this morning. Thanks so much to our guests, Tsepo Mongwai, who is editor, SABC Economics Desk editor. Thanks as well to Ndumiso economist, Haley Parry, who is money coach and facilitator at One Life's Truth About Money, and Thabo Holo, who is the program manager at Old Mutual. And just as we wrap up, of course, some news coming out of KZN this morning. The NFP has just wrapped up or is having their elective conference in KZN. The results coming out of that elective conference look like this. Zandile Mbieni has received 190 votes, making Ivan Barnes the new president of the NFP. Deputy president will be Milton Sokela. The chairperson is Musiso Mkabela. But Jade Pulse is on that story, and she'll be updating you on the new leadership on the NFP throughout the day. So do stay with the SABC News. For myself, Naledi Moleo, have yourselves a fabulous Sunday.